This is the Elements on Air number
11.
And today we have two amazing special guests. We have Eric and Lindsay. And we happen to be neighbors, but I also would like to introduce you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves first and kind of like how we've come to build this friendship?
I took yoga teacher training with Monica and Kendall, and they were very great teachers and friends, and Lindsay got to know them through that, and then a house came available right next door, and
Which is awesome.
Amazing.
we didn't expect you to move in, but then you did. There you are.
Always expect the unexpected with us,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
True to that. And we brought you here on the podcast today. We're really excited about this because
We see you guys doing a whole bunch
whole
of
lot.
stuff over there.
They're always busy in their house and creating beautiful spaces and actually beautiful places for community, and that inspires us a whole lot on our side when we see you active. And well, before we go there, I just want to have a little bit of a conversation about like where our community is with this COVID situation and kind of like what your feeling is around at the moment. And I know this changes week by week, and we're all adapting in a certain way. Right now we are in the beginning of May, and there's conversations in our state to reopen as soon as next week.
I don't think there are conversations. I think the governor said that the stay-at-home order will end on the 14th, and they're going to start reopening on the 15th. Small gyms and hair salons, things like that.
What are your feelings around it?
I'm enjoying quarantine, and it makes me nervous the people that are really excited to mostly get right back at being totally social. So I think that maybe if we want to try breaking quarantine, I think that it should be more gradual than it sounds like. It sounds a little like abrupt. All of a sudden, everybody's free, and so I think a little bit of that worries me.
So if there is no quarantine, would you go out?
If they broke quarantine, would I go out?
Mm-hmm.
No. I think I would continue doing everything probably the same. Not really seeing people going on distant walks, going to the grocery store with a mask.
And I feel that's the same thing that we've been receiving as far as feedback for the studio. We sent out an email a couple of days ago about just what people's feelings are about returning back into the studio, and so far about 52% say no, we want to wait until the numbers start going down to return back into kind of like that community type of environment, which it's totally understandable, and we feel the same way on our end. We feel that people congregating in a closed space put people at risk, and that brings us over into the conversation. You know, how have our lives changed since we've been in this stay-at-home period? Can you tell us a little bit about your side?
To go back really quickly, I think being cautious. There's the first part is no one, since it's so new, the scientific community doesn't know any. They are finding this stuff out slowly, but also the lack of leadership. It's all falling to state governments and then to business owners to be leaders, which is a shame. But it seems like caution is the best way to go. As far as our lives,
It is a shame, but
yeah.
to just tap in that real quick, it's a shame, but there's also an opportunity in it as well. It's like, as we're faced with the decision whether to open, whether not, you know, what's going on with rent, the studio, and all these things, it's like, if you come down to one thing, and yes, I know everybody's in different boat, different places. People have more money, people have less money, people are starving, people aren't. but it's how do you protect human life?
Mhm.
Like that part is not replaceable in any form or fashion. You can always create more money. You can always create more things, but you can't create more life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like coming down to a small business, like every time I go through the rabbit hole of these decisions and whether to open and what the numbers look like and how to protect people in the studio, I come back to this one thought. How do I protect life? And if I can't do it 100%, is it worth it?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I guess, or at least, whether it's 100%, as much as you possibly can. I mean, there's always risks in life, but this is one that seems like a undue risk so soon. So, yeah.
But I think that's where we can shine as small business owners if
Yeah.
there is a lack of leadership, and then if small businesses, can come to that fundamental decision and all stand up together, I think we can create an impact.
Tell us how your life has changed.
Yeah. Well, work has gone away, but since I didn't go to an office, then I'm still just at home and replacing that work right now with projects and with I'm still editing a movie and coloring a movie, so I do actually have my own some work. It's not paid work right now, but it's a project that will be out eventually. So it hasn't changed too much. Except, I mean, mostly it's just that we see less people. We'd host a lot of stuff and dinners and people coming over. So it's hard, but it's a small thing to give up for also knowing that family's safe and we feel more responsible for the community and for ourselves, and also and for ourselves as well. Just we don't want to get this thing, so a little bit of caution is worth that.
What the change in lifestyles requires also, like a change in perspective and mindset, and so moving into finding contentment in the time of a pandemic, and what is difficult for most people as we experience our feelings is that when the information through our entire communities and through the world itself is a fear, we are kind of tuning into that wavelength of fear as well. And so to be able to find our place where we can find a nice routine, where we can find a contentment in living with the tools that we have, with the communities that we've created, I think that's an important part of like cultivating and really kind of bringing inspiration into the people that need it the most, because people are mental health is being challenged at this time. And what on your end, what are your practices? What do you do to keep that space clean in your heart and cultivating that contentment?
Since you have, work's gone away, things have changed, and there's more times, what do you fill that time with, and how do you keep that, your mind clean, your heart clean, your feelings clean?
I think that the first part of what Monica was saying kind of makes me think like how some people are kind of viewing it as a revolution, and it seems like there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of anger right now. And so I think that the people that are so, if I was a person, I'm not particularly angry or overly fearful of what's happening, but with everything happening, it's kind of like people are backlashing against the bigger people and the government and things that run us. And so I think that there's a lot of like words like shot at those people, but some people aren't choosing to like break the cycle from them to the bigger people. So for me, breaking that cycle includes like trying to be more self-sustainable. So trying to garden more and seeing what can I do on my own, like how many seeds can I germinate, which ones germinate better in water, which ones are better in soil, and just trying to learn from that makes me feel more empowered for myself.
And it also builds I think it builds a nice boundary too from feeling all that that overwhelming like fear and anger, and building that boundary is important also to feel compassion for others that are experiencing those kinds of feelings, because you can see that they're reacting to the stimulus, right? And so if we don't break that cycle, then we're falling right into that same space. And so the boundaries that we create too, we're creating a lot of boundaries around the things that we can't control, and focusing on the things that we can thrive through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even like speaking of boundaries, the even type of information that you let in on your phone. You know, the type of information that you let into your house, the type of, you know, putting a boundary up of what you let in and how you let it affect you.
Yeah, we have a running joke with Ella that when Kendall gets on his phone, now he's COVIDing, so it's a verb now. COVIDing. And so we're like, COVIDing. They're like, no, he's COVIDing. You need to pull him away from the phone.
Yeah, they're like, all right, Dad, you got 2 minutes. Go. Say what you want to say, and then you're done for the rest of the day. I'm like, okay.
Well, yeah, and it's a balance, since there's so much unknown. I mean, and that's the way life is in general, but even right now, in life, you make some goals, and it might be a year, it might be 2 years. And I mean, the important thing is to have some flexibility in regular life, non-COVID life, because you know those things can change, and if you try to be too rigid with those goals, then you probably will be disappointed. But more so now, I think that's important, is very much just trying to enjoy the day, do things that may help prepare, whether you're gardening more, whether you're making sure you don't have extra subscriptions to things, you know, your overhead's lower, things that you can do that you're not trying to set goals because there's so much unknown, or big goals. I mean, certainly little goals, but I think it's more so now that, or if you're setting goals, they're very flexible, because there's just there's so much unknown. And so you can if you say, I'm going to do this by then because the government says it's going to be, or I think it's going to be open, you may just be setting yourself up for a letdown.
Yeah, I think Lindsay had a amazing point in this too, which is kind of you're hinting on as well, is the turning inwards and finding that sustainability. It's like we have all this extra time. What can we do with it so we don't have to rely as much on this whole infrastructure that we created? So we can make our footprint smaller, you know, cutting back our subscriptions, all these things, and really harness the direction that we're putting our attention in our lives, less on everything that's outside and more on sustainability and turning inwards. And it's like, you know, what can we do better now to make sure we're not relying too much on everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that for me, just speaking about my own experience, it's also self-sustainability as far as being able to like grow my food and be kind of a bit, I don't want to say off grid, but you know, just having this home style that can provide instead of just taking. Mm-hmm. To me, that requires a learning curve. Like I know some, but to me it's a whole other area that I have to learn about. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say real quick, and two, is like, as you start to lean into this unknown part, maybe gardening and finding ways to reduce everything that you're putting out and to be more sustainable, you know, as Monica and I, we don't really eat meat. And so as I see all these articles come about the supply chain and how there's a meat shortage and all this stuff, it's like there's no fear in me about it because we don't eat it.
Yeah.
You know, and so if we can learn to become more self-sustainable and have our gardens and stuff, and it'll reduce that amount of fear that comes up when all these things start coming out.
Yeah. What as far as like I know we see you gardening and you're building a beautiful garden in your backyard, and you have all this
Front yard.
beautiful in front yard. Oh, yeah, front yard.
Okay.
It's in the yard.
It's in the yard, and you know, I know Lindsay that you have a experience of this. Can you tell us a little bit of like where all this comes from, where you've been learning it, and how you're applying it?
And so when in February, late February, I came back from South America. I did a permaculture training just to kind of learn more different types of ways of growing. And
What great timing.
yeah, really great timing. So I just kind of like got on it, started the seedlings. I did probably before I started anything, I did a lot of research.
How did you choose what you were going to plant?
Mostly, so I make one of my quarantine routines is that every night before bed I'll make an infusion. So I'll get like a half-gallon jar and I'll fill it with herbs at the bottom, hot water, covered in a towel, leave it overnight, and then in the morning that's my herbal infusion for the whole day. And so I was just kind of like, what herbs do I feel most medicinal to me and which ones do I actually enjoy the most? It's just kind of an experiment also, like things that are interesting to grow, things that are easy to grow, things that I enjoy drinking. And
Do you hope that at the end of the season that you'd have your vegetables and food self-grown at home, or do you see kind of supplementing it with other food as far as vegetables go?
I think it definitely will have to be, we'll have to get like outsourced totally. Some different things like grains, for instance, would be something that we would need to outsource. Other than that, I think we'll be living off of squash, corn, and greens and tomatoes for a while.
Yeah.
All you need is chickens now.
Yeah.
We've thought about it. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole idea, if you're in town, is not to try and. I think maybe it can be daunting because people are like, well, I need to grow enough to really live, and that would be nice, I guess, but I think it's really difficult. So if you're just doing whatever you can, and that will, if everybody does that, then it'll take pressure off the stuff we have to outsource or be brought in.
The supply chain.
And that's helpful.
I feel inspired.
Well, I get inspired every time I walk by your fence and see you guys working.
No joke. What about in your family world and having this separation in families? How is that affecting you?
Well, Lindsay's folks and her family are in South Carolina, so they're a ways away, and that's difficult. Everyone's healthy, though. And my family here it's been fine. They're all healthy and abiding by social distancing. I had a cousin that passed away last week from cancer in Charlotte, which was difficult for our family. And she had been in hospice. I mean, she'd been battling cancer for 3 years, so it wasn't sudden. So, but still, during this time, my aunt and my uncle are older, and so my sister and I couldn't go down because it was just too much risk. And my cousin's brother came across the country, drove across with his wife and 2 little girls, without stopping at hotels or just stopping for gas. No restaurants, no nothing, so they could be there.
Wow.
So that was hard because she wanted to see us. We have a small family and very close family. But our cousin wanted to see my sister and I and father and family. But yeah, it was just something that couldn't do. We had Zoom calls with the family, and it's hard, obviously, but at least we had seen her over Christmas and had plenty of time to talk and know this was coming. And but still, that's a very big difference. Usually, you would be there with family. So, but when you're going to put other family members that you know are healthy but maybe older at risk, it just wasn't worth it. So, which is a shame.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and the mourning process, especially for the ones that are directly affected by death, it's difficult to be in complete isolation and all the steps, all the feelings that you go through, and I can imagine it can be pretty challenging for everyone that experiences that.
yeah. I mean, she didn't. She had her husband and parents and brother and sister-in-law and niece and nephew, so that was great. They were all sort of quarantined together. But the biggest thing was also, actually that's what I missed, the biggest thing was if she had caught it from an outside source, then since she knew she was going to die, she would have then been in a hospital, no one could visit her. So that's one thing that I really wanted to avoid. So it's worth us having to just talk to her on the phone so she can make sure she has her immediate family right there until the end.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, my as you know, my mom was in the hospital, and like we couldn't talk to her, we couldn't go see her. She had no advocate on her side, besides my sister trying to call and talk to the nurses, and yeah, not a fun situation to be in.
No, I can't imagine all the people that are suffering at the hospital, like you said, without an advocate, and
not being able to communicate. So the phones that they had were turned off, and my mom, she has an iPad. She doesn't have a phone or anything, and so they were telling her, like, well, just use your phone. It's like she doesn't have a phone, and so then there was like no way to communicate with her.
It's a tremendous thing that that not only the people that are inside sick and ailing, and also the care staff that the overwhelming feelings they have. I was in a not in a workshop, but it's more of and it's a global conference, and this is through the Heartland Institute, and they have a direct relationship with the hospitals in their area, and I believe they're in Massachusetts. And what they do is they train the medical staff to tune into the heart coherence, because it is the brain, and information flows in through the heart and then comes into our minds, and we are attuned to the earth in its in the electromagnetic field. And so coming back a little bit into that, how we are all experiencing fear because it's up in the air, and we pick it up the same way that we are tuning to the earth's vibration. And so he gives this, it may seem like a very little skill or practice for everyone, but what he recommends is when we're feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling all of this, what we deem negative feelings, is to tune into our heart space and just breathe. We don't have to go into a meditative state. We could be driving. We could be in the, when people in front of us are too close to us or things like that at this moment, and just tuning into the heart space and breathing in 4 count, inhale and exhale. And that brings the attunement back into the frequency of that is coherence, and that brings our immune system up.
Because if our attention's always out here and then it's on the fear and the negativity, then that's kind of what we tune into, and then the way we start feeling. And the studies that they were talking about is your attention, if you bring it to a single part of the body, they would actually measure it, and the temperature of that part of the body would go up. And so if we can bring our attention to our heart space and the energy that it creates, and just like pull all of our attention back in for a moment.
And as you know, in all of our classes, we start classes with an intention or a dedication, and the suggestion is that because we are overwhelmed globally, sometimes it's hard to tune into the feeling of gratitude because we can't feel it. But instead, the suggestion is to feel appreciation. And so that to me is easier. Wow, yeah, I can truly appreciate this lighting. I can truly appreciate my feet under the mat. Or no, my